So these are the due dates, and I am actually going to drop assignment 4 and 5 today with a slight change to the content of assignment 5. You'll be happy with it. Don't worry, just give me a second and I'll show you. And then nothing else will change. So everything else, it's on the syllabus, and you're just getting assignment 5 early. The due date is still the same, and the max due date is still the same. The one thing I really want to strongly encourage you to remember, though, is do not look at the max due date as the due date, because what will happen is that you won't, sorry, hang on, let me just let these folks in. Do not treat the max due date as your due date. Try your hardest to do something in between, because if you don't even start looking at the assignment until you're thinking about the max due date, you'll end up, rushing. And then if you have any questions about the assignment, you'll end up asking them at the last minute as well, which makes it really hard, because it's a lot of questions that I might not be able to answer, or that you might take longer than you had anticipated to answer. So make sure that you recognize that max due date is not, try not to treat it like a max due date. And if you prefer, just forget that there's a max due date, and just focus on the regular due date. Does that make sense? And then the other thing, if you notice here for the take home and the final case, the reason that those don't have a due date and the max due date is the due date is naturally because those are the ones that have that limit, that don't have any difference, right? So I put those in the max due date. So in case there's any questions about this, because those are kind of the more like a test ones, right? So those are the 1 week exactly. Does that make sense? Hopefully. So that's why there's no due and max due there. I guess I could have put the same thing on both. I didn't think to do that. I don't know why, but I did it like that. So I can change it so that it says the same date on both, if that will be easier. But that's what that means, in case you're wondering. Any questions about due dates?
Dr. S, where are we going to find this on Canvas? Announcements or syllabus? Or
oh, it's in the announcements.
Okay.
But also when you go to assignments, it'll be on there. So you'll see the assignments, and you'll have these two. I'm about to make these go live today when I talk about them. But this is just like a little snapshot for you. So, by the way, when I send announcements, does that send you guys an email or anything? Or is that just, if I'm lucky, you guys will check it? Can somebody tell me that?
It sends an email.
It does send you an email? Okay, good. Because that's what my hope is.
Yeah, and you can set it to do a push notification on your phone too. That's kind of how I get them from Canvas. Yeah.
I try to be limited in my use of announcements because I assume it sends you an email. So I don't use announcements for every small thing, but so that I'm hoping that the announcements do get to you like as a proper, hey, this is important, read it. So if you're not getting them, let me know and we can see how we can figure out to make sure, because there are a few announcements. So another one that I want to emphasize going forward, if you've already submitted stuff, don't worry, don't stress, but please make sure, again, I said this in the syllabus way back when, so I don't necessarily say it for every assignment because I don't remember to, but it was a blanket statement. But please make sure that when you submit things, only put your red ID, no cover pages, and no names, because it just helps me to grade blind, because I don't want to see your name. I don't want to see any identifying information. And I can actually set Canvas to do that so that I only see the sheet and not ever your name as I'm grading. Or I download the forms and it also sets it to anonymous. And that way I'm only grading the content. And that's just one way that I try to do to mitigate bias or any kind of, there's so many of you that I still, the red ID, there's no way and no chance that I'm gonna remember your red ID. So that's something that I try to really emphasize, because I think it's more fair as I grade. So please, if you do that, try to make sure that you are consistent about doing that. And like I said, no need to go back, but just going forward for the remaining assignments, please do. Okay. And so what I'm going to do is jump into this week, and hopefully everybody did view last week's video. I am sorry again that I was not able to do it synchronously, because it is one of my favorites. Decision making is fascinating to me. But it's actually a really good one to have online, because it's very, very explicit. So it's very specific to what you need to do in terms of making a decision and how to understand it. And one of the most important takeaways from last week was decision making, right? And in terms of the types and different types of decisions that we can make. And one of those, the Delphi method, as I had indicated in the video, is my favorite, because I find it to be the most transparent and easiest method. And so I subjected you all to some decision-making analyses. So I wanted to open up with you to close up our manager section, what your results were of your decision-making. I did have about 31 responses, which is a few more than we have in class, but we're just gonna go with that. Maybe some of you had an extra chance at responding, so don't worry about that. So you'll do a much better job of cleaning up the data in the future. But what I want you to do is I want you to take this as an opportunity to see how you can gather information quickly, expeditiously, accurately, transparently, and then we'll talk about data cleaning in the fall when you guys do methods with me. So we're not going to talk about methods today. We're just going to talk about results. Fair? Okay, so without further ado, I'm going to share your results of your, sorry, I don't know where to put your little faces. Oh, is that the wrong screen? Am I sharing the, oh, hold it. Hold on. I don't know why it always does this. Let's do, there we go. So everybody can see a full screen of just you, right? So this is your results. So I called it you. And so the first question that we asked, and if you notice, I didn't ask you all, which is what we've been doing in the case study, is I didn't ask you all to choose between interventions, because not every decision is choosing between an intervention, right? Sometimes and often it's choosing between desirable choices, right? So you're not necessarily saying, like, you know, drink a cup of chlorine or get your nails done. So sometimes it's something like get your nails done or go to a movie. So these are both desirable choices. Or some of you may not hate movies or hate getting nails done, whatever. For me, those are two desirable choices. So that's why I chose this, because it gives you an opportunity to also rank between desirable choices. And the thing is, with alternatives, it's very desirable. And if you notice, the visual is terrible here. So we're actually going to jump to the Delphi screen itself. But I wanted you to see that you can easily rank them, and it's very easy to read here. It's not easy to read on the screen here. So just give me 1 second. I'm going to jump us to it. But I did go ahead and pop it up there for you guys. Come on, report. Okay. So now I'm going to stop sharing that screen, because I just remembered how hard it is to see that. And so you can see, this is, I use Qualtrics. How many of you guys have heard of Qualtrics? So it doesn't matter if you don't have Qualtrics, you can do this by hand. And if you guys recall, the first question was to ask you to rank choices between alternative and to just put them into different categories, right? And the idea was you to select a range of alternatives. And the alternatives in our case were, can you guys all see the screen okay? Were basically, the first alternative was early career, less early, moderate early, later career, and then senior level. So that was kind of the range of choices, right? And you were asked to drag different characteristics into different boxes. Everybody remember that? Yes? Okay. So the cool thing about this is then you can use this type of approach to see what did people value most. So at an early career level, this is where a bachelor's degree was really important, right? At a master's degree, where was it really important? Probably as you got later on in your career. Can you guys still see? You guys are leaning in, so let me. Is that better? Oh, they're not getting bigger. Sorry. So we have 10 responses and 10 responses at moderately and better, very important. So let me make this easier for you. The rank was early career was ranked highly for less experience and some understanding of hospital quality measures. And the education was important too. Does everybody see that? And if you notice, look at the rankings for some of these lower categories. So it was not important for an early careerist to be familiar with development and implementation of strategic initiatives. It was not as important to be able to analyze hospital strategic goals, to collaborate with internal blah, 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 to collaborate, okay? So as we moved up in terms of experience, we saw a transition in the challenges, right? In the differences in capacity. So why is this important? When could we use something like this to rank these kinds of knowledge, skills, and abilities? Does anybody have any ideas when this could be useful for us? Aside from a case analysis about training.
When you're writing a job description?
Okay, that was exactly the end game. So something in between. We'll pretend we didn't hear that one yet. But yes, exactly.
So just kind of going along with that, like an in-between is you're just kind of using this to hone in on what areas you really, that prospective people are really interested in. So it's just kind of like with the Delphi technique. It's like you start with all these different, like really broad, and then like with each survey, you can kind of move closer to like, what do I really need to have in this? So
exactly. Both of you are right on, right? And the other cool thing, so typically, and if you are really interested in the Delphi method, Rand is who developed this, the Rand Corporation. I don't know if you're familiar with them, but typically you're going to need about 2 rounds. And the next thing that you can do, because we've only done 1 round. You're my expert panel, and we've only done 1 round. But the next round would be, now how would you place these in terms of, for example, must-haves and would be nice, or non-negotiables and deal breakers, like absolutely important and also would exceed our expectation, right? So that's another way to narrow them down even more. Why do you do that as well? Let's say you have 2 excellent candidates and you can't decide because they're so similar, right? So this is another way to do that, because then you would say, well, these are the core, and then these are the extra attributes that we care about. And you could have dozens of them. Does that kind of make sense? So how many of you had trouble with this activity, or any thoughts on this activity? Anybody want to share their thoughts on this element and what that was like for them, or surprising or anything like that? And or surprises on their colleagues and everyone, the course's response. I can tell you my thoughts if you're curious, if you have any questions about what I observed.
I think there was one point where I felt like they kind of built on each other. Like, you do need some of these skills at a lower level. So I wasn't sure, like, it is very important to have them, but I was like, how do I place them at a lower level when I know they're also needed at a higher level?
Ah, okay. So
yeah, Chris, I also had the same, how Jennifer said, I had the same thought about how we can place things at a lower level, which are not important. But again, as you move on to the senior or extremely important level, how should we place? Should we place, let's say, having a bachelor's degree in not as important in a mid-career, or a master's degree not as important in a mid-career, and also master's degree as an extremely important as a senior level? So I was not sure about that as well. So.
Okay, very good. Okay, so what would you do about that in the future?
Well, in the future, I would choose things that are extremely important. So I would pick the extremely important things, because if they're not important, they're not important, but they cannot be neglected if they are extremely important.
Okay, so the non-negotiables. So you're already moving into your second step, right?
I
To
guess.
the second round of the Delphi, which is very good. Very good. Okay. Anything else? Any other questions or comments? That's excellent.
Yeah, for me, I hated how it was like early mid-career and senior level, but the other levels weren't kind of more specific. Is it like 5 years? Like, it's slightly important. I was like, okay, maybe that's like 5 years into the career, that kind of thing.
And that was done on purpose, right? So that you guys could kind of estimate the whole range. Okay. Anything else? And you write this how you want. It could have been 3 levels, right? You could have done just 2 levels, early career and senior level, and that's it. But I wanted more granularity. So this is one way to do this, right? So another way, and we did this too, is the ranking, right? Just ranking how you felt about something. So how happy something would make you. And this is very similar to what we did in the other section, but it makes it very easy for you to decide what choice. So you see the difference here is that it just flips the outcomes, right? So here it's the content, and then this is the categories. Here it's the categories, and this is the content. Does that make sense? I almost feel like this was a little easier to read, but it's kind of a personal preference, right? So the question asked here, just to reiterate, was which of these job benefits, and I just made them up, would make you more happy than extremely happy versus less happy, right? So you had to rank the choices, and you could only rank one at a time, right? It forced you into a choice. Does everybody remember this?
Yeah.
So the first level was paid professional development. The second level was low stress. The third was supportive environment. The fourth was a family leave policy. The fifth was free parking. I was kind of trying to hit every category a little bit. And the final category was telecommuting, okay? So overwhelmingly, a lot of you really, really wanted a supportive environment, which makes great sense, right? And I didn't define supportive environment either, but everybody really, really liked that. And this was closely followed by, there was a tie. Paid professional development and family leave policy. So you can see that these are the elements that make your class extremely happy. So that's great. And then, so this is by the way, a great evaluation for example, as a manager for your employees. So what elements of the position and of your current job description make you extremely happy, make you somewhat happy, so on and so forth. Does that make sense? And then really, these are the ones that you can just stop here and look, but still. So you can see that these were what you value. And then the next set was what you value next, which here it was low stress. And then this was and telecommuting. So they're very close, 14 and 13. And then for those if you can't see well, and then this neither happy nor unhappy, so this is a kind of a neutral one, was telecommuting and free parking. And lastly, it was telecommuting. So it was very few because most everyone stayed happy up here. Now, what I want to emphasize is, and this is something that is very, very important in Likert, in multiple categories, in ranking, or anything that you're going to do and you think about Delphi and things like that, which is why it is important that we have multiple alternatives, right? Remember how I keep saying alternatives, alternative, status quo? Is that notice the skew. So if you notice, how is everything skewed here? Nobody's extremely unhappy about everything, right? Because I am only asking about benefits. Do you notice this? So in a lot of these surveys and in a lot of the questions in your Delphi and a lot of the things that you ask, you're going to tend to skew. So you typically will focus on these elements, right? So the average is going to stay at about extremely happy or happy. That doesn't mean everybody's always happy, right? But it does mean that really the norm or the average is actually positive. It's very leans, very positive. So your starting point is not necessarily 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's actually leaning towards a very positive skew, which is why when you look at some of the Delphi results, especially in the slides from last week, nothing was 0, right? I don't know if you guys remember the table of the example that I showed you, but none of it is ever going to be 0, which is also why it's very important to have enough questions to give you some differentiation. Is everybody kind of with me with what I'm talking about, or are you all feeling lost? Yes, no, maybe. And I can provide you another example if you feel like it would help. Let me exit out of this. So for example, and this is a good example. Here we go. If you look at these responses, I'm gonna, you guys see this? Can you see how this entire row is all zeros? It doesn't necessarily mean that no one is extremely unhappy, but most people, when they're responding to any kind of Delphi survey or Likert scale like this, they're never going to give you a totally negative response unless they're extremely just filled with anger or they really hate you. Or they hate, like they had a horrible experience with professional development at a previous job, for example. That's when somebody, oops, okay, sorry. Okay, this is not, these squares are not good. Does that make sense? Kind of, yes, no? Just a little hand or something to let me know that you guys are kind of with me.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I just want to make sure that there's some recognition of what's happening here, because otherwise I don't want to lose you guys. So I can definitely give you more explanation if it will help.
I'm more curious about the one person who doesn't want all these benefits.
No, well, you could speculate internally, but because some of these were forced answers, so you had to pick something. And so if they were ranking, then that's, which is totally fine. But, and that's also how, we'll talk about that a little bit in methods next semester as well. But the point is that you have to be very careful when even reading these, because you want to think about what is the average. So your starting point is actually about here. And so when you look at these, what you're really looking for is this is your median or your mean. And that's why we always look at median values when we're looking at any kind of rank choice. We don't look at means. We don't look at, like, for example, graduate student rankings. We don't rank students 0 to 5. You guys are already coming in at a 4. You're already a high level, high achieving graduate student. Less than 10% of Americans have a master's degree, less than, and when you think about racial, ethnic differences and gender differences, it's an even smaller amount. So you have to think about that when you are differentiating. So if you want different, that's why we have a lot of alternatives. That's why we have a lot of decision rules, because we want to make a good decision that we know is going to have a lot of different textures to it. Because if everybody is just saying, do you want benefits? Yes, no. well then, yeah, everybody's going to say, I'm extremely happy with benefits. So do you see what I'm saying? It's either going to be, yes, I want benefits, right? But when we start to do these benefits, you can start to see some differentiation. So you can start to see that this is a very important benefit. Actually, no, this is a very important benefit. You see this? This ends up being a very important benefit, even though, look at this one. This one, everybody was extremely happy about this. Look at where a huge chunk of people were here, right? So this ended up being a much more important benefit than we thought. This is an important benefit as well, surprisingly, but not so much as the others because look, it starts to be much more spread out. So this is not as important, but it is telling for us. Does that make sense? Do you see how these are all skewed? So 3.3, 3.2, 3.2, 3.2, 6.7, 23.3, so on and so forth. So we know that this is a very important one. And this one is this one's very distributed. So this one is iffy, i.e. negotiable. And this one is iffy, but it seems to be very important in terms of the median, right? So does this kind of make sense when you look at how they're distributed? The other thing that I would do differently than I did here is put other like less desirable benefits. I couldn't think of any at the time, so I didn't, but what are some less desirable benefits that we could put to really get some differentiation so that would make people extremely unhappy? Can anybody think of a benefit that would make people less happy?
Maybe like high deductible health insurance.
Oh gosh, that's a good one. Yes, because that may not be something that matters to people in terms of how they choose a job, okay? And why you do that, the reason that you do that is because it helps you see, again, it pushes that the categories so that you're able to see where the categories are loaded. So we would expect there to be either a big range of responses, right? So people will be kind of all over the place with those, or probably neither unhappy or unhappy or somewhat unhappy, because it's not really a benefit. It's more of a long-term or distal benefit that they can't tangibly benefit from now. I was thinking about like, although I guess overtime would be kind of good, but I was thinking about like all the overtime you want, but then I'm like, well, actually, if I were younger and I didn't have kids, I wouldn't mind that. So, so I'm like, no, it's not necessarily a bad benefit. So that one's much better, Ruth. Anybody think of another one? I see a chat. That is not a benefit. Although, you know, coffee with the CEO, that's good. Unlimited vacation, there you go. So these are all that could be potentially different or bad. And this is also a great place to check it out. To check out, now you're making me think that this also would be a place to feel different benefits. But yes, so coffee with the CEO is a benefit, but it's really not, right? Because you're not really getting anything. Having to work at multiple, oh yeah, that's one. My work actually has pizza with the CEO. Oh, that's, well, you know. But is that a benefit you would advertise, right? So that's what I'm trying to get at. All right, so any questions about this? So the reason that I'm giving you this alternative and not the one that we saw in the recording is so that you guys can see two different kinds. So that when you're doing your case analyses and you look at alternatives, you can begin to see what happens here. Instead of extremely happy, you could have status quo, you could have alternative 1, you could have alternative 2, and then you could say, these are the decision rules, right? So here it would be something like aligns with our strategic plan. We can afford it right now. We can afford it in 5 years. Supportive environment, or not supportive environment. Management buys into it. Employees love it. It will increase our revenue. So this is the same idea But this is for a lot more difficult choices for you as a manager individually, right? So I wanted you guys to see different types of scales and different ways that you can be looking at making decisions. Does that make sense? Okay. And you're still applying, and I didn't show you, oops, you're still applying the counts, right? So for example, this is a proportion. This is just the number of people that responded. But let's say you only have 3 of you on your strategic plan committee. You can have the person select whatever they want. And then remember, I don't know if you guys actually did look at, I'm hoping you guys did look at the recording. If you did not or have not yet, please do so. Because instead of just doing the count of the person responding, let's say you don't have enough people, and let's say that 4 of you have to make a decision, then you would assign a value to that decision, right? So let's say these are the non-negotiables. Let's say 1 and 2 have to absolutely happen. Then whoever picks this, it's worth 5 points, whereas this is worth 2 points, because these are like the wish list, right? So these are the mandatory. These are the wish list decision rules. Does that make sense? And you can assign a weight to them. And all of this is transparent, because the key when you're making these types of decisions is transparency. I can't emphasize that enough. Is everybody kind of with me, or would one more example help? Like with a case analysis example.
Can we have another example?
Yeah, I'm just worried that if you didn't look at the, but you also, I'm expecting everybody to look at the recording, because otherwise I'm going to be really sad. Because I made that recording for y'all laying down like a big old lady. So now I won't be really sad. Why can't I get rid of this? Okay, so what we're going to do is I'm going to show you, get out of here. How do I get rid of this? Give me 1 second. So we're going to make this super simple, okay? So everybody, okay, rule, status quo. So status quo is we are, okay, everybody is gonna wear whatever clothes they want to school. Decision 1 is uniform. Decision 2 is Halloween costume. Don't be biased, okay? Some of you guys have to vote against Halloween costume. Okay, so decision rules. So right now the status quo for dress code at SDSU is just wear whatever you're wearing, right? And then, but we're gonna make a new rule, and we're gonna offer alternatives as to whether or not students have to wear uniforms of my choosing, or Halloween costumes, also of my choosing. You don't know what Halloween costume is gonna be. So we're gonna make rules. So the rules are what? So what are the deal breakers? For example, no nudity. What else?
Maybe no jeans.
Why not? Is that a deal breaker, or is that a, let's put that on wish list.
Okay.
We need something a little harder than that. So make it like a policy level or something like rule-based, right?
Gender neutral.
Ooh, good. Okay, give me 1 or 2 more. Wish list. Not specific to any of the alternatives, but specific to all the alternatives, which is dress code, specific to dress codes.
Do like no unnatural hair colors?
My Halloween costumes.
No makeup?
No makeup, yeah.
Okay.
Depends on what kind of Halloween costume you were
I know, that's what I'm saying, but we're going with it. We're going with it. I'm gonna say,
planning.
okay, 2 more. Come on, people. I know you can do this. Actually, 1 more, because I'm gonna show you the programming.
What's a French tuck?
What?
Like how you tuck in your shirt, like not all the way tucked in, just partial.
Fancy. I don't know what that is. But okay, you know what? That's fine. That works too. So French tuck. So this is really important, whatever it means. Okay, so just the front. Just the front of the shirt is tucked in, assuming that we're wearing shirts. Okay, so now the question that you'll go around and ask, right, is, and just in line with Dr. Shafino's crazy examples, we're gonna ask ourselves, currently, and it's what you're wearing right now. If you're not wearing pants, this doesn't count. Pretend you were going to school, because I get it, it's pandemic. So pretend you had to go to campus and you're wearing pretty much what you're wearing now. Does your current dress code meet the no nudity rule? Does it meet it? Not at all, partially or fully? So we're all going to be one person right now. This is just one person. We're giving it to one person right now. Okay, I need a volunteer. This will make it easier. Then you guys will understand. Who haven't I heard from in a while? Any volunteers? Don't be shy. Jonathan, I'm picking on you because I remember from last semester I had you. Jonathan, are you there? Okay, let's try. Oh, okay, can't talk, just answer. Okay, no, we need somebody that can talk. Sorry, Jonathan. Anybody that can talk, jump in. Brittany, I see your face, so you jumped in. Sorry, I know, now nobody's gonna wanna show their face. Brittany, do you mind volunteering?
Sure.
Okay, so currently, based on the status quo for everybody else and everybody in general, would you say that the status quo option, meaning what we're doing now, fits our decision rule?
Based on like the no nudity, just that
Yes.
one? Yeah, then yes.
So it would be fully, right? Is it fully, partially, or does not at all meet our rule? Does everybody understand it fully meets our rule?
I hope it's fully.
I hope so too. Okay, if you're not wearing pants, then okay, gender neutral. Does the current status quo option fully meet our rules? Would we say that's a
Partial?
partial? Good. What about no jeans? Anybody wearing jeans?
I'm wearing jeans.
Okay, so partial. No makeup? Is anybody not wearing makeup?
I'm not wearing makeup.
I'm not wearing
Okay.
makeup.
There we go. Partial. Anybody wearing makeup?
Yeah.
Okay, so we have one person. Okay, so it does partially. And what about, is anybody doing the French tuck or just the front? Nobody? We need at least one person or we're not at all meeting it. Not one person is tucking in just the front.
I'm doing a French tuck.
Okay, there we go. Oh, sorry. We have a partial. Good job, guys. So do you see that right now this is 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So this is one person in your committee, right? So now the uniform, are you ready? The uniform is a onesie. So you just put it on and you zip it up. Okay? And it's whatever color, you have the choice of blue, gray, or black. And that's it. That's the uniform. Any questions? It's breathable. It's one uniform, one size fits all, one gender fits all, room for everything, on top and bottom, all of that good stuff. Got it? Okay, so does the uniform fit our first decision rule? Partially, fully, not at all. This
Fully.
fully. What about gender neutral?
Fully.
There you go. What about no jeans?
Fully.
Fully. What about no makeup?
Partially.
Good, because I didn't say anything about that, did I? What about French tuck, just the front?
Not at all.
Good. So that's 15, 17. Uh-oh, guys. All right. Halloween costume. Halloween costume is an Easter bunny. So everybody has to dress like an Easter bunny, which means that it's a furry and poofy tail and ears and I don't know. And it can be a 2-piece or a 1-piece. But it just has to be white on top, white on the bottom, and poofy tail and ears, bunny ears. Okay. So, number 1, does it fully or partially or not at all? Come on, folks, you gotta be faster than this.
Fully.
Fully.
I don't know if bunnies,
I think it will be fully.
yeah. Thank you.
Fully.
Partial?
Partial.
Partial.
Okay,
Not at all.
Not at all.
not at all. Oh, well, this is a conundrum. So, now, so you'll do this with as many people as you think have a say in the decision, right? So when you're doing your individual cases, really the decision maker is you, one person. So you only do one, right? But typically you'll do this over and over and over again, and you'll average the results across people because people can put their opinions, right? So the idea though is then you either rerun the Delphi across the uniform and Halloween costume and create additional parameters to break the tie, or you implement both. Does that make sense?
Can you say that one more time, Dr. S?
So usually you don't have a tie. So this is annoying, but that's okay. But usually what you'll do is, I should have picked this different Halloween costume. My bad. It's Easter is coming, so it just popped in my head. So usually when you have a tie though, you'll either implement both or portions that you like of both, or you will rerun the second round with these two, with additional parameters, or have people, or make the Likert scale more options than just the 3. Does that make sense?
Yeah, okay.
So you can say, okay, you're allowed to put a 1 or a 3 or a 4. To introduce more texture. And keep in mind, the more people that answer, the more granularity you're going to have. This was one person, one imaginary person answering, right? Even though we all did it together. Does that make sense?
I have a question. So when we were doing it in comparison, like how likely we like the benefit or so, it was the point scale applied to the whole question, right? It didn't depend on how much they liked the actual benefit.
I'm sorry, I'm not following.
So going back to the extremely happy, somewhat happy, or extremely unhappy, when we gave it a point scale, so it would be 5 points for the paid professional development, it would be applied for everybody in that question that answered it.
Yes.
Okay.
If I'm not mistaken and I'm understanding you, yes. So yes, it would be applied to every single person that ranked it this way. Because everybody ranked this first, everybody who ranked this second, so on and so forth. Is that what you mean?
Yes.
Okay, yes. So that's where you can start to see, that's why it's important to see who ranked what as most important. Okay. And it looks like everybody ranked this third, but actually I might need to go back and see this then, because if you're saying, oh no, everybody ranked this most important, even though it's third because it was listed third. I was like, wait, that's throwing me off. Yes, the answer is still yes.
Okay.
Don't listen to me and what I was saying to myself. Okay, does that make sense?
Yep.
All right, so now you guys are able to rank within individual perceptions and benefits and desires, like a Likert scale. That's called a Likert scale, by the way, or across decisions, across choices. And this is very important because you're going to do a lot of this, especially those of you that work in quality or are interested in quality. Most of the time when you're hearing about patient satisfaction, which is now considered patient experience, you're going to be doing a great deal of this. So it's really important for you to see that, first of all, nothing is really entirely 100% accurate, but more importantly, the more people that you ask, the better your responses and results will get, because you'll get a better idea of distributions of people's perceptions. So whatever you end up doing, it's always better to do it in a group and always better to be as transparent as possible. All right, any questions about choices and decision making? So just to let you know, not only are all your cases about this, but your final case is definitely going to have a huge focus on this. So that's why I'm also spending so much time emphasizing this, because it is so extremely important. Okay. Any questions about this? Okay. So that ends our section on management. And I want to, and I'll post those slides. I don't remember if I did or not, so I want to make sure that I do in case I forget to. The other section that I want us to work on, was everybody able to access the readings? Because I couldn't get them to open up this time. Like usually I can give you the preview on the PDF, and for some reason, they were misbehaving in such a way that they weren't letting me open them up. So hopefully though, everybody was able to access the readings well. Okay, so the other piece that I want to discuss today is getting started on human resources. And do you guys want a 2-minute break or bathroom break, run, stretch break before we start on HR? Or are you guys ready to keep going? Going once, going twice. All right, we're going to keep going. All right, so let me do this up. Okay, so human resource. There are multiple functions. What I want us to focus on though, and because it's so important for your, oh, sorry, my sharing is not wanting to. Oh. Are you able to see just a big full screen of HR? Okay. And because this is so important for your upcoming internships and job description, I want you to recognize the importance of human resources. So typically, when we think about human resources, it doesn't have the most positive connotation. And that's a misnomer. And it's an old misnomer, right? We make a lot of jokes, and I myself make a lot of jokes and get very frustrated. But they're a key and critical part of the organization. And don't ever forget the organization is bounded, right? It's a bounded, goal-driven entity that is very clear in what it's trying to do, or it tries to be very clear in what it's trying to do, right? And so the thing about the human resource is that it has to be organized within the context of the organization. And most of you got this in the org chart activity, but I think we really struggle because it's hard to conceptualize a reporting requirement that doesn't really have anybody under it. It doesn't supervise anyone, and it reports up to high-level leadership. but at the same time, everybody is dependent on it, right? It's very unique, human resources, because they have a lot of power, but they don't have a lot of power. So it's a unique and interesting place. So when we think about the human resource, and in case you're wondering, I am purposely saying the human resource. I want us to first begin thinking about who joins organizations, why we join organizations, what the purpose of it, so that we can understand why we have to manage the human resource. And I'm sure that you'll probably find yourself repeating the human resource and laughing at me, but at least you'll remember it. And that's what I want from this. But remember how I told you that we join organizations and managers are sort of designated with these superpowers for no apparent reason other than that they are provided this title, right? They don't actually have any power over any other human being, but people willingly, voluntarily join organizations and agree to these structures of hierarchy for a reason. And so we do this because joining an organization gives us purpose. And when we join an organization, we have a purpose for joining an organization. Often, obviously, it's money, because we all need money. Most of us, a lot of us, huge part of us. And it's rewarding and it makes us happy. We like to be, there's a whole effect in terms of healthcare, in terms of health research about the healthy worker effect, because healthy people work. If you're able to work, that means you're healthy enough to work. You're able to contribute to a mission, a vision, a goal, things like that. So it's this whole element that's in addition to the compensation. Much like we talked about the motivation of the organization, human beings, guess what? We also have a motivation, surprise. And so that's the mutual benefit between the organization and the individual. So you can kind of see where the individual and the organization begin to link, and that's the human resource. And we talked about it in terms of technology, in terms of fit and the theories. We talked about human technology and human capacity and things like that. And so the way the organizations look at this human resource is as a way to maintain the human resource. Much like you would maintain all the other elements of your organization, the human resource, the human capital is another element that needs to be maintained. And so this is a definition that I like to use in terms of what occurs in the organizational context. And it's not just about shuffling people about, cutting checks, things like that, but it's really about the human resource as a resource that needs to be developed, it needs to be attended to, and it needs to be supported, just like the organization, right? Because an organization also has a motivation. So it's the same idea, but at the people level. And so when we think about the human resource can look a number of different ways. It can be a full-time employee. So these probably look familiar to everybody. I'm sure every single one of you has been a human resource in one of these particular ways, maybe not necessarily in a health service organization, but in some way you've either maybe been a full-time employee, maybe you have been contracted temporarily, you have been a part-timer, you have been a volunteer. You will be a volunteer or an intern, which I don't know why I didn't write intern here, but that's really temporary. So don't feel left out. Interns are in here. You're in there somewhere, okay? And just to give you an idea, the human resource allotment for a medium-sized organization, are you guys sick of me saying the human resource yet? Is about 1,000 people or 1,000 FTEs, full-time equivalent. And a full-time equivalent is 40 hours, at least in the US, okay? And so where we see that engagement is everywhere, because an associate, as we call it in the theory of the firm, so this is more businessy, so hang in there, is essential for everything, for communication, for engagement, for transmission, for sustainability. So we say, we talked about the free choice, essential for operations, And when we think about healthcare, every single associate or human resource is involved in some way. So managers and administrators, your patients are the healthcare providers, the clinicians. So you're not directly involved in patient care, but you are indirectly involved in critical patient care. And so you have to help and make sure that every other provider is also supported, developed, and so on and so forth. And this is very influential. And I want you to see where associates are very influential. Internally is kind of obvious, and also externally. So can anybody think of why an associate is influential externally? Any guesses? Sorry, I got distracted by admitting somebody. I had a person waiting. Any guesses as to how a human resource has influence externally?
Recruiting?
Yes, very good. So positive influence recruiting, right? That's excellent. Anybody else? So what might be a negative influence? For the organization. So that same word of mouth that can be positive or negative. Employees are critical. I'm sure every single one of us, and this has been part of your assignments, is identifying a whistleblower, identifying somebody or just a group of people, a collective action that has helped to change bad behavior by an organization. So this is a good thing, right? So people are very important. They're critical. And in a way, they make up the organization. To me, the human resource is the organization, okay? And so this gives you a little bit exactly what I just said earlier. But it also improves safety and productivity and pretty much everything else when you're thinking about your people as human resources. So overall, though, I want you to think about, we're going to talk a little bit more about why we go to work, okay? So going back to that idea of why you work and how we all have different motivations, as a worker, it is really important to be motivated. Just like we spent 2 whole weeks on what motivates organizations to decide profit, it is really important for you guys to realize that we have to be motivated by something other than just making income. And you guys saw that from your own response to benefits. And so what I want you to think about in terms of motivation at the individual level is how important it is, how important the human resource is to the organization. And that's why human resources isn't like we used to know it before of cutting checks. It has become a completely different system within the system of an organization. And what you guys can conceptualize it as, and we're only going to do one theory, I promise, and that's Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And so I want you to think about motivation, or the motivation of people or the human resource within an organization just from Maslow's hierarchy of needs. There are multiple theories. If you're interested, I'm happy to share them with you. There's content theories, what factors in the workplace motivate people, the theory X and theory Y, the Hertzberg two-factor theory. So the reason that I like Maslow's is really about what motivates us, not why we're motivated or how it occurs, but really it's just about what motivates us, what gets us going. And I'm sure all of you will have a different response, but overall, we're all mostly familiar with these. And the premise behind Maslow's hierarchy of needs is really about having a certain level of needs met before you can achieve additional needs met. So this is really about knowing exactly what you need or your employees need. So when you become a manager, you're not just thinking about having your own needs met in terms of, does this job pay me enough to pay my bills? Is this job going to be something that I can stay in long term? And then once you're able to achieve those, is this job somewhere I can grow in? does this job have upward mobility for me? Right? So you see how your questions, your self-awareness and your own personal questions begin to change as you feel safer and as your needs are met within a position. But it's not just the job that is doing that for you. Remember, we're open and natural in terms of organizations because of human needs. So that means that you're also changing. And as you get educated, for example, you're also able to ask yourself these questions. So as you're going through, when you're doing interviews and things like that, make sure you're asking these questions. So it's not just, are they willing to hire me, but are they meeting my needs? Is this a place that I can feel supported? Do they have the resources to support me? Do they support the human resource? Okay. So make sure that you recognize that it's a definite two-way street. So human resources, and these are just some stats you can look at on your own, but it's a really big area. So if any of you have any interest in human resources, see me, especially if you're interested in an internship in HR. I have a few contacts. I know it's not a very like sexy or common area, but it is very unique and very interesting. So it's something that you might think about. And like I said, this is kind of the old way of looking at HR, right? So it was just kind of there. We cut checks, it did background checks, and that's it, right? Licensing or clinician licensing and credentialing for physicians, things like that. But now it's a whole new way of looking at the human resource. And it's really the core, at its core is planning and development. It's the development of the resource, and that's you guys. So that's something that you can think about in terms of how you approach HR today. So we're going to very quickly cover just the first three, if anything, just the first two, but functions of human resources management. But essentially, there's 7 overall resources that I want you to think about. And all of these are critical for supporting the human resource. And when we think about workforce planning, that is a key component of making sure that the organization overall performs well. So when you're thinking about how does human resources link to the VMOSA and the strategic planning and everything else, it's right there. Because remember, we talked about, and I'm jumping the gun a little bit, but we talked about when we're first starting our strategic planning, we need to think about where are we, right? What do we have? Guess what's one of the critical components? It's people. Because labor costs account for a huge chunk of an organization's expenses. Huge. And not just labor, but turnover. So when you are planning strategically for an organization's performance goals, you absolutely want to think about who you have. Do they have the skills for the goals that you have for the performance you desire? And then why not? And then the next question, oh, hang on, let me get to that. So planning here, right? So needs, scheduled adjustment, benefits, activities, and then whether or not you have the technology internally, right? So if you're going to grow that group, why are people like jumping in and out of the class? I keep getting all these notifications. The Wi-Fi must be acting wonky. So the key is, do we have the people or do we go out and get them? So that's such a critical element for strategic planning as well. And I really like this plan because does anybody remember what theory this is? The make or buy? Anybody remember that one?
The economic cost.
Yes.
Yeah.
Very good. Transaction cost economics.
Yeah, sorry.
So that's great. So this is where if the organization maybe hasn't fully done a good job of getting the right talent, it can definitely identify who it needs to either build up, so send to training, which is why you see a lot of organizations offering college credit, so they'll pay for you to go to school, or they're going to hire people that have the training that they need. And so this is a huge part of what HR does now. is making sure that they develop the folks with the skills that they have, or that they bring in the folks with the skills that are necessary. And part of this has to do with recruitment and retention of the right employees. So this is where we're getting into what's really critical for today, and that's the job description. How many of you are familiar with what is a job description? I'm sure I'll see everybody's hand up. But how many of you have actually really looked at a job description as a critical part of what you do when you start a new job? How many of you have accepted a job and asked for a job description with your acceptance? Or confirmed your job description? Anybody? Anybody? I hope that you will do that now as you accept jobs or internships. Anybody know why? I'll just give you one little phrase with that. And it's called other duties as assigned. Has anybody ever heard that? Anybody ever heard of other duties as assigned? Can I see a little hand if you have? Oh, I see a little check mark. Okay. I see a little thumb. Okay. Okay. So as much as you think this is crazy, or not, I don't know why I always say this, because I feel like this is how I talk to my son sometimes. So when you're talking to a 14-year-old, you suspend disbelief. But the job description, I never used to care either until I started doing a lot more management work. And I realized how critical it is, because it can make or break a lot of your happiness in an organization. Because if you don't know what you have to do, part of the motivation that is necessary for you to feel safe psychologically, professionally, is to know what you have to do so that you can achieve the tasks and the goals that you set for yourself, right? And one of the biggest frustrations, and we've talked about this even with organizations, is uncertainty. And job ambiguity is one major source of uncertainty. And one of the biggest issues with being a good manager is also ambiguity and uncertainty. So providing clear roles is also very important. The problem is that organizations are typically not well organized enough to provide these right off the bat. So it becomes a question of negotiating even for a good job description, which is why I want you guys to become familiar enough and confident enough to know that you want and request a good job description, a job description that clearly specifies to you exactly what's going on and what you need. So when we look at what an organization does, it talks about job description, what they do. Okay, we talk about that. Yeah, okay, you get that from HR. Now let's really talk about job description, because that's what matters. So I pulled this from the Society for Human Resource Management. So they're like the professional organization for HR. They're pretty good at what they do. They're really into HR, trust me. And these are not the only elements, but the key elements of a job description. You'll need these for your assignment, hint, hint. So remember this slide, okay? So these are really important for many reasons, but this is what you should look for. You should know what position type, what expected hours, what the work environment looks like. Remember competencies, and you already know what a competency is, right? And you know the difference between a competency and knowledge and skills because you reviewed those in managers, right? And if you forgot, that's okay, because we have a recording, you can go back. So always consider that if you don't have at least 80% of these things, then you need to ask about them. And these are also good things to ask about during an interview, because it shows that you are really paying attention. One thing that isn't in here, and that we'll talk about a little bit, are some newer elements of job descriptions. And they're not in here because I'm not trying to make them required for your assignment so nobody freaks out. But I think it's really important to consider are two things. One is equity, considerations for equity and disparities. So for example, good job descriptions now that are equity focused include gender neutral pronouns. And you'll see why when I show you assignment 5, okay? So instead of he or she, the pronouns are they. Right? Does that make sense? And the other one is that often when we are writing job descriptions, they seem like we are not going to be qualified for quite some time. And you'll notice that because a lot of you struggled with what level of seniority or experience should I have for this type of training. And so you'll see some, very rarely lately, but it's catching on, is that you'll see some job descriptions that say at 6 months, the employee should be able to, and that's the job description. So it's telling you that you don't have to immediately know it, but that you will eventually know it. And what I encourage you is when you're writing a job description, when you're reading a job description, to read it in that voice. Will I know this in 3 or 6 months? Will I, am I able to do this in 3 or 6 months? Yes, of course, easily. Because what ends up happening is we tend to disqualify ourselves if we are not perfectly qualified for a job when we're reading it because we think we can't do it on day one. But realistically, nobody can do anything on day one because you don't even have your badge. Does that make sense? Yes, no, a little? Okay, we'll look at one and I'll show you why in just a second. The thing is that this becomes even more, what's the word? Explicit? No, exacerbated for gender minorities and for racial ethnic minorities and for age. So if you're younger or if you're older than the mainstream applicant pool, this is also exacerbated. Does that make sense? So when you're reading these things, also think, I'm too young for this, or I'm too old for this, or so on and so forth. Because this is what is happening right now in hiring practices. And so we have to push back against that. And so you have to correct that as you read these so that you don't disqualify yourself for a great opportunity. Yes, yes, Taylor, very good. Please, everybody read the chat. Taylor has a great comment. Job descriptions also help set boundaries when you advocate or request for higher positions, or also when you request a promotion. And I think that's what you mean also for higher positions, I assume. So jump on in, Taylor. That's exactly
that's exactly
right. Because that also helps you get that quantitative. So you can also say, look, this is in my job description. Here's all the extra things I've been doing, which I'm happy to do, but show me the money, right? All right. So in general, what makes for a good job description? Well, one, you tell the truth. So if an organization is asking for something, they need to be able to explain it. Be concise. So often what happens is that they're cutting and pasting from many different job descriptions. I will tell you that the majority of job descriptions you see are terrible because they're done in a rush, they're not done well, and they're annoying. So you guys aren't going to be like that though, because you guys are going to be awesome job description writers. Be specific. Often they're written ambiguously on purpose. Avoid overuse of adjectives. That's kind of just a life rule for yourself. I think we can all agree that we use too many adjectives. And be reflective of company culture. And so this is where you often want to align to the vision, mission, value, which is why it's always important to put a small blurb about the organization and do a funnel. Even 2 sentences is sufficient, okay? But yeah, so what does everybody think of this job description here? Any ideas? I think it's pretty truthful. Would anybody apply to this job?
I think it's like telling the truth and it's very specific.
A little sexist, but yeah. It's a joke, by the way, it's not. But yes. But it is very specific. And that is the one good thing about it. Everything else seems pretty terrible about this job description. Right? All right, so I'm gonna pop into the next one. So here's a sample job description. And as you can see, it doesn't have to be an extremely elaborate description, right? You can be very specific. The headers can be very specific, just like I showed you, but it doesn't have to be very elaborate, but it has to be there. Does that make sense? And you might think, why is she spending so much time on job descriptions? This is how important they are. This is how important they are. So here's a job description. First of all, there should be a title. If there's no title, a job title, that's your first warning sign. So this tells you a little bit about the organization. Oh, rat. Sorry. Tells you a bit about the org. Oh, and I'm going over, I'm sorry, I'll hurry up. And then it tells you about the job itself, right? It tells you about the employment type. The one thing missing from this, can anybody tell me what the missing thing is? There's a few things that aren't perfect, but there's one thing that's definitely missing right away.
Salary?
Yes. Yes. Now that's not it's not by law, it's not required, but it is always good to have a salary range, okay? Because it does make it easier for you to get an idea of what kind of training, education, and information, and it gives you an idea for your negotiating space mentally. So it is not, again, required by law, but it is something that should be there, if you were to ask me, okay? But what they do have that's going well is a qualified candidate. They don't put any he or she. And that, I think, is a very important element, okay? And so that goes into our internships. And I wanted you guys to really focus on that because that is the whole purpose of your assignment. So we're going to leave it here. But this is the old requirement 360. I left it there just because it's pre-pandemic, but I figured I'd just leave it because I forgot how many hours the pandemic hours were, and I didn't want to get it wrong. So it's on Canvas though, I swear. But the idea is that you definitely want to, have, it's very similar. And the cool thing is that you have a lot of resources to draw from when you're writing your internship description. You don't have to write your internship description for your assignment. So I'm going to jump to the assignment to finish up today so you guys can see, and I'll activate it. But what you do have to do is, and oh, where did we go? Oh, there you go. Okay, can everybody see this?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm publishing it now. But this all you have to do is write a job description. I did easily make it super obvious for your internships. I get that. So there is definitely a little bit of bias. It does not. If you have a job that you are in love with and you really want to write that job description, please do that. Don't feel like you absolutely have to do the internship. But I do strongly encourage you to do that, especially if you're in the process of doing this for your summer internships. If you're a dually and you don't have to, it's still a great opportunity to write a job description. So regardless of whether or not you even have an internship requirement, those of you that are not just HMP students that are doing an internship, this is a critical skill for you to have just for any type of job that you're looking for, okay? So that's why I said an executive level or management internship is a great target. But basically, upload single space, 1-inch margins, maximum 2 pages, no name or cover page, complete census. Although if you're doing the bullets, you're welcome to do bullets in this one, very much so. Okay? Any questions about the job description? And the due date, it's open till the 12th, but it's due April 9th. Oh, actually, no, it should be May 1st. I'm sorry, I'll fix this. That should have been a May 1st max deadline. I'll fix that then. I'll fix that right now. Any questions about assignment 4?
So Dr. It's like what we intend to focus our internship on, because right now, currently, I'm speaking for myself, I don't have a job, but I do want to take an internship, take on an internship specific to what I would be doing. I feel that I would be seeing myself in the next, guess what, 5 years. So if I am imagining myself in an internship position that I want to take, then that's the job description you want, correct?
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. And so that can be, it can be, and then that way you can just extract what you need for your actual internship. It can be for a job that you really like. It can be whatever you want. And there's loads of job descriptions online that you can, but I want you to improve on whatever you see online. But I want you to draw from our management competencies that we've reviewed. I want you to draw from the internship competencies that you're provided when you're signing up for your internship. That includes our CAMI competencies. Those of you that are not HMP, I can provide you with that form because it's very helpful. You can go to our homepage, the HMP home site, so you can get CAMI competencies, because all of this language is helpful for you to write. Because remember, we want executive level experiences, which means that we want an executive level description that we want to fit. And so you're going to see that in our CAMI description. Okay. And then, but yes, that's exactly right, Talat.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. And there's your other duties as assigned. I thought that was funny. Okay, and then the other assignment that I'm going to drop on you guys is, and this one will also, oddly enough, help you, is the bias quiz. So when we talked about our bounded rationality and we talked about our perspectives on job descriptions, if we even fit things, I want us to see how any bias, any implicit bias may impact our decision-making as well. And so instead of doing our case practice, because you guys have been doing really well, and so I'll have the case practice back to you guys, hopefully in the next couple of weeks. I want you guys, instead of doing a second case practice, I want you guys to do these quizzes. These should take about less than an hour of your time. And so hopefully, like I said, I don't trade out something for you guys to do more work. This should take actually less time, but you'll do 2 of the project implicit bias quizzes. So how many of you have heard of project implicit? Anybody? A couple of you? Okay, great. So these are to look at what we perceive that may be outside of our control, because often we may think we're not biased, and we find that we tend to be biased. And a big part of it is racial and ethnic bias, but a lot of it is also gender bias. And so I want us to start with gender career bias. And so what I've assigned you, and please read all the steps before you actually do anything, but what I've assigned you to do is you're going to pick, you're assigned, you must do the gender, there's gender science, the gender career bias test. That one you have to do, right? So you have to do this one. And then you have to do a second one of your choosing. And you can see that there's all kinds of them. And I've done most of these and have found some really interesting results. And so but it does show me as a Mexican immigrant, highly educated professor, that I too am full of biases that I have to constantly fight against every single day. And so that helps me realize that I can do better every single day. Oddly enough, yes, even I have biases. And that's a joke because there's no education that helps us. Education helps us address biases, but it doesn't fully take them away, because again, we're bounded by where we were, how we were raised, cultural identity, so on and so forth. So the second one is any one of your choosing. And so once you've taken them, you take them here at this link. So you visit the link, You take gender career, you select the second one. Don't forget the name, because once you've completed the 2 bias tests, you have to go here to get credit for this. So it's a pretty easy 100 points. This is an assignment, 100 points. So the rubric is completed. Complete my little worksheet. Make sense? Questions about this? And this is going to help us for continuing HR, but really it's to hit our communication section. So I want it to be done sooner rather than later. Okay? And if you have any, and that should have been May 1st as well. I always forget the max deadline. So any questions, comments about the assignment 5?
So this is in place of case 2, right? Not the second quiz. Okay.
Wait, case 2?
Or
Case practice 2. Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Yes. I will not give you extra. Yeah. No, this is replacing. This is why it's assignment 5. Yes. But hopefully you won't wait till May 1st, because this one I really just want to see the results so we can use them for communications. Hint, hint, wink, wink. Don't wait till March. So any questions on these 2 assignments? And you are totally allowed to wait till May 1st. And I know I'm giving them to you early. Totally get it. Because this one's not even due till the 19th. Sorry, number 5 is not even due till the 19th. So I know you have plenty of time, but I'm going ahead and dropping them both for you guys first right now. So, but recognize that they're due way out in the future. Not that far in the future, so don't get too cozy. And that's it. And I apologize again because I've gone over the extra 15 minutes because I missed you all and wanted to keep you forever. So other than that, class is done. I will stop recording and you can stay on if you have any questions or comments or thoughts.